It's a gang few recognize. But on the streets of Texas, their name strikes fear.
If you cross them, you're probably going to get killed.
They were ruthless, and they were cold-blooded.
The Texas Syndicate. They say everything's bigger in the Lone Star State.
They take pride in the fact that their members are actually, Texans.
And for this gang, there are no limits.
I grabbed him up behind the neck, and I stabbed him to death.
Going in, you know that you may have to kill your own brother.
It's run like an elite business.
You would compare them to a powerful corporation.
Now, Gangland unearths how one of the deadliest gangs in Texas began and the price its leaders paid to leave.
There's no getting out, period. They'll kill you. That's the bottom line.
Austin, Texas, April 19th, 2005. In the parking lot of an adult club known as the Landing Strip, a security camera captured this confrontation. A man drunkenly waved a gun in the face of gangster Leonardo Capone Rubio. Capone's reputation was legend.
He is someone who is known as a strong arm, as an enforcer, an intimidator, someone who's able to, just with his presence, instill fear.
And Capone's gang was an even bigger legend, in prison and on the streets. Capone was a proud member of the Texas Syndicate, known as TS, one of the Lone Star State's deadliest and most feared gangs.
Nobody messed with them because they knew if they did, that there was going to be hell to pay.
Capone wears his allegiance to the gang proudly. His entire upper body is covered with TS tattoos. On his throat is one of the symbols of the syndicate, the cuerno, Spanish for longhorn. On his forearm, he wears a large T over an S.
He's got the state of Texas on his neck. He's got the T with the S crossed over it. He's got the Roman numerals 20 and 19, which are the 20th and 19th letter of the alphabet, TS, on his shoulders. He's proud of who he is.
Yet Capone was no hothead. With a gun in his face, he first tried to defuse the situation. But when diplomacy didn't work, he took action.
He confronted the guy with the gun, attempted to take it away, and knocked him out in one punch. His associates then also assaulted the man with the gun.
The man was left unconscious in the parking lot. Later, a passerby rifled through his pockets, stealing his wallet. After he regained consciousness, the victim tried to get to his truck, but was too dazed to get far. Later, when he finally managed to get into his vehicle, the night would go from bad to worse.
After that, the victim subsequently attempts to drive away.
Barely conscious, the man's truck careened toward the nightclub. Inside the building, a group of strippers were waiting to take the stage. They never got the chance. The man's truck slams through a wall, sending the unsuspecting dancers flying. Amazingly, none of the performers were seriously injured.
That video was telling about the Texas Syndicate. There was a fearlessness. There was no hesitation to conduct violence. You don't look around and run for help. You don't call the police. You take care of business right then and there.
The Texas Syndicate. It's a gang many have never heard of. Yet in the second largest state in the Union, they're one of the biggest and most feared criminal enterprises.
You'll find Texas Syndicate members, not just major areas such as Austin, Dallas, the Valley, Houston. They're everywhere.
The gang's business activities are many, reaching across the criminal underworld.
Texas Syndicate will do anything to further their cause, to get money for the organization. That includes murder, kidnapping, prostitution, racketeering. They're even moving into computer crimes, identity theft.
But their bread and butter is distributing drugs supplied by the Mexican cartels. They are one of the largest traffickers of cocaine and marijuana in the Lone Star State.
The Texas Syndicate is not known to be street level on the corner, buying and selling in an open-air drug market. No, they're behind the scenes.
These are no ordinary street thugs. They're cold, calculating businessmen, partners in the billion-dollar drug industry.
Most people think gang is the guy walking down the street, shirt tail hanging out, you know, pants down to here. And you have some that run legitimate businesses. You have some that are attorneys. Might be your next door neighbor, might be a school teacher. And this is a business, might be a criminal business, but it's still a business to them.
A business they run with a ruthless efficiency.
If you start messing with their money, you know, people get angry about it. You weren't gonna get just your hand slapped. They were gonna make sure that you had some holes in you.
Though based in the Lone Star State, the Texas Syndicate began thousands of miles away in California's Folsom Prison. The gang was formed in the 1970s by inmates called Tejanos. The Tejanos were often targeted by violent California prison gangs and needed some muscle.
Texans weren't really liked well over there, so they formed this family to look out for each other, because it's like being in a foreign country.
As those gangsters were paroled, they moved back to Texas, where they recruited more members on the streets and in the prisons. But not just anyone could join the Texas Syndicate. Marianne Denner was a guard at Darrington Prison during the early 1980s. She witnessed a selective recruiting process that valued brains over brute strength.
A lot of times it would be the calmest. With the calmest head, they recruited heart and mind over numbers. That was the big distinction.
The syndicate sought members who could do their dirty work without attracting the heat.
There's not a lot of play given to a member who randomly goes off and draws attention to the Texas Syndicate by conducting senseless random violence.
This former high-ranking gang member describes the ideal candidate.
Somebody who would hold his weight and keep his mouth shut and go on by their business, that's what they were looking for. They were very, very, very selective about who they brought in.
Antonio Riojas was just 26 years old when he began serving a 5-year sentence in a Texas prison in 1979 for aggravated robbery. He immediately stood out to both inmates and the administration.
This is a very strong offender, very intelligent. Riojas commanded respect. He had respect from administration, everybody. Just his demeanor. He didn't joke with people.
Born near Lubbock, Texas, Riojas had been in trouble with the law since he was a child.
I started running wild, doing crazy things because I started hanging around with the people that were either drug fiends or just people who thought they were underworld or something.
Within months of arriving at the prison, the Texas Syndicate approached Riojas about joining.
TAS figured that I was more like they were when the heat came down. When things had to be done, that they knew that I would follow through.
Once he was in, Riojas' natural leadership abilities quickly propelled him to the gang's top rank of chairman. It was the kind of gangland success story that many dreamed of and would do anything to achieve. Austin, Texas, July 2000. 20-year-old Magdaleno Medina was a prospect for the syndicate, but he needed to prove his dedication.
The Texas Syndicate comes first. It comes before friends. It comes before family. Going in, you know that you may have to kill your own brother.
Medina, known on the streets as Junior, was friends with Jovi Rios, a 24-year-old mother of 3. Rios partied often with Medina and members of the TS. She was close to the gang, so close that she knew the ins and outs of their drug-running operations. Then Rios began hanging out with members of the syndicate's main business rival, the Texas Mexican Mafia, also known as Mexiconomy, or ME for short. For decades, the prison gang had battled the syndicate for control of the drug trade in Texas. By associating with the enemy, Rios had crossed a line. Syndicate leaders in Austin issued an ultimatum.
The TS members in Austin who knew Jovi Rios and chose to associate with her were there potentially causing a threat. If they did not eliminate this problem, they were the ones to be eliminated.
Magdaleno Medina, Rios' friend, was ordered to kill her. It was his muleta, or penance, for bringing Rios into the circle.
That is like a punishment that they were going to have to face to show that they were still serious about being a TS member.
On the night of July 2nd, Medina and a fellow syndicate member picked Rios up from her home in Austin, then drove to this deserted back road.
She was taken to a remote area under the belief that they were going to party and have fun, use drugs.
Medina pulled out a pistol. Jovi Rios quickly realized her life was on the line.
He tried to pull the trigger, had problems with the gun, which put her on notice that the hit was about to take place. At which point she started pleading with him, mentioning her children.
What Medina did next would thrust him into the ranks of one of the most dangerous gangs in Texas.
He chose the Texas Syndicate above Jovi and their personal friendship, and showed his quota, his heart, to the Texas Syndicate.
Austin, Texas, October 2001. It had been almost a year since 24-year-old Jovi Rios, a mother of 3, was reported missing by her family. This man, Detective Balderrama, investigated the case. He asked that we not use his full name and conceal his identity because of his undercover work with gangs.
She had been there one night. As far as they knew, she had gone to the store and ended up not coming back.
Now, working off a tip, police drove 15 miles south of the city to this secluded field along Interstate 35.
It was over the course of 2 days of digging and looking before her skeletal remains were actually found.
There was nothing left but scattered bones in the shallow grave with other ribs and such scattered.
Rios' skull revealed she had been shot in the back of the head, execution style. Authorities learned that in the months leading up to her murder, Rios had befriended a man named Magdaleno Medina. He'd introduced her to members of the gang he'd hoped to join, a ruthless criminal enterprise called the Texas Syndicate. The syndicate feared the young woman was leaking inside information about their drug operations to a rival gang. Medina was ordered to kill her. It was on this deserted road that Rios met her fate.
She was pleading for him not to shoot her because of her children. Magdaleno Medina went ahead and shot her anyway, shot her in the head.
Medina's crime proved his allegiance to the gang. He had chosen business over friendship.
It absolutely propelled his membership into the Texas Syndicate.
He was willing to commit a very violent crime on a young woman who had children on behalf of the organization, to prove his heart for the organization.
The callousness of the crime also caught the attention of authorities. For several years, law enforcement had been investigating a series of homicides around the Austin area. And the trail of violence consistently pointed to one prison gang, a criminal organization whose formation had transformed the Texas underworld.
Word on the street was it was the Texas Syndicate enforcing their rules.
Originally formed in California, the Texas Syndicate began taking root in their home state's prison system in the late 1970s. At first, the gang struggled to gain a foothold, stymied by a group of inmates called building tenders. These dominant prisoners were handpicked by guards to help keep the gangs in check. James Marquardt, a former prison guard and criminologist, relied heavily on the building tenders at Eastham Prison in East Texas.
When I was a staff member, I was responsible for working 4 cell blocks. That's roughly 500 inmates. But in each cell block, you had anywhere between 6 and 15 building tenders.
The building tenders were allowed to use violence and intimidation to keep inmates in line. But that changed in 1980 with a ruling in a civil rights lawsuit against the Texas Department of Corrections. The judge ordered massive reforms that included eliminating the use of building tenders.
When you pull that buffer group out of there, that leaves the staff by themselves to control those hundreds of inmates. It's almost like you're taking the lid off a pressure cooker.
Guards were suddenly outnumbered.
The inmates would get right in your face and, call you son of a bitch and an MF and spit and scream in your face and say they're going to rape your wife or kill your kids or they're going to kill you if you don't, look the other way.
The reforms that were intended to improve prison life did the opposite. Gangs began jockeying for power, and the prisons became a war zone.
Literally hundreds of inmates were stabbed. And the vast majority of those involved Texas Syndicate members, primarily killing members of other rival Hispanic groups within the prison system.
The system didn't have control. The inmates had control of the prison system at that time.
The gangs divided along racial and ethnic lines. Amid the chaos, the Texas Syndicate saw a chance to expand their drug business and staked claim to the prison's Latino population.
Now, the Texas Syndicate became the dominant player in the early 1980s, not only on 1 or 2 institutions, but throughout the Texas prison system.
The TS also seized control of the prison rackets formerly run by the building tenders, which included prostitution, gambling, and most importantly, the drug trade.
It's lucrative, you can make a lot of money in prison, and they knew that the staff couldn't control it.
Arnold Darby was one of the syndicate's most notorious members at the time. As a Caucasian, Darby was a rarity in the almost exclusively Mexican-American gang.
Being white, without having someone in Texas Syndicate to put you forward to represent you, you didn't have a chance. So, I just happened to know one of the founding members.
Darby was one of only 4 whites ever recruited into the Tejano gang. It was an allegiance to the death.
It's probably kind of hard to explain to someone that's never been there. They are your brother. They'll die for you just as you'll die for them.
But that loyalty stopped when it came to traitors. This footage from 1985 shows one syndicate member stabbing another to death for snitching. It was a reality of gang life that Arnold Darby accepted.
I'd already made the obligation, that I would put my whole heart into it. And so when the hit come down, I just fulfilled it.
So when Darby learned a snitch was serving time with him at Darrington Prison in East Texas, he knew what he had to do. He and another gang member ambushed the man.
Another Texas Syndicate member grabbed him up behind the neck and pulled him into this real small bathroom. And, that's when I stabbed him to death.
Using a handmade knife called a shank, Darby stabbed the man 42 times.
It was a terrible thing for me to have to, the man really didn't do anything to me personally. That did bother me an awful lot.
Through this kind of ruthlessness, the Texas Syndicate controlled the prisons, but they wouldn't go unchallenged for long. In 1984, a new gang of Hispanic inmates known as the Texas Mexican Mafia, or Mexiconomy, formed to protect themselves from the syndicate. They also set their sights on the TS's lucrative drug business behind prison walls. The Texas Mexican Mafia began a massive recruiting campaign. But the syndicate didn't flinch.
We were outnumbered by Mexican Mafia by, I would say, 4 to 5 to 1. Texas Syndicate was so full of pride that they were not going to let that stop us.
One of the rules of the Texas Syndicate was that no other Hispanic gang would ever be allowed in the Texas prison system, you know, that we'd go to war before we'd allow another Mexican gang to begin. We had to start hitting them, you know.
The syndicate launched a full-out gang war. Some claim it started in prisons around the state through a veiled message broadcast during a radio show. TS members, sometimes called Longhorns, were given a call to arms and told to start killing Texas Mexican Mafia members, also known as M&Ms.
There's a story that says that the information was relayed through a radio station in Houston that has a call-in radio show. And a woman called in and said, I'd like to send a message to all you Longhorns out there. It's time for you to start eating M&Ms. And that's how they say the war kicked off.
The Texas Syndicate had a strategy of terror. These two former TS members, who asked to remain anonymous, were part of the gang during the war.
The Mexican Mafia had the mentality that you don't do nothing until they try to make a move on you. And the Texas Syndicate's mentality was, once you see him, attack him, kill him, make sure he's dead. If you see him move, keep on hitting him.
The syndicate began picking off the Mexican Mafia's leadership.
You see officers and nurses running everywhere, and then they bring a guy in a gunny, and it was all bloody, and sometimes they were covered up.
The Texas Syndicate took out Mexican Mafia left and right.
The Texas Mexican Mafia began crumbling, but the syndicate needed to deliver a death blow. And they did, in an event that would come to be known as Bloody Sunday.
They made a statement. They were ruthless, and they were cold-blooded.
Darrington Prison, East Texas, 1985. The Texas Syndicate and the Texas Mexican Mafia were in a brutal struggle to control the drug trade. The syndicate, known as TS, had taken out much of the Mafia's leadership. But they wanted to clinch their victory.
It got real bad at that time, but there was no quitting.
This is the way that Texas Syndicate handles business.
On September 8th, a gang informant tipped off the syndicate that the Texas Mexican Mafia was planning to attack them in the common area with hidden weapons. The leaders of the syndicate arrived at the crowded room and quickly found the concealed Shanks. Then, in a stunning display of force, they turned the tables.
The Mexican Mafia were just sitting in the day room, and the TS went up behind them, stabbed them, grabbed them. They were all stab wounds in the neck, in the throat, in the back, in the chest, in the stomach.
Within minutes, 3 Mexican Mafia members lay dead. News media dubbed the homicides Bloody Sunday. Administrators locked down the prison for 2 months. But the Texas Syndicate had achieved its goal. They were now the most elite Tejano gang in the Lone Star State. And the other gangs knew it.
They might not tell you to your face, but they know they fear the Texas Syndicate much more than the Texas Syndicate fears them.
Keeping that status meant maintaining high recruiting standards.
TS wouldn't recruit nobody unless somebody knew him from childhood, or they knew him from family ties or stuff like that.
The syndicate also weeded out those considered too young.
They only recruited people that were 25, 28 years old and above. This is somebody that was mature, not a young kid.
The syndicate's membership process was as demanding as any corporation's and included an extensive background check in prison and on the streets.
And your picture would be sent around to all the units. They would investigate you on each individual unit to your character before you could join. You couldn't have never associated with blacks. You couldn't have never had any association with homosexuals. And of course, you could have never been a snitch.
It could take years for a new prospect to be invited into the syndicate. The process required that a padrino, Spanish for godfather, sponsor the new candidate, guiding them into the gang. Each new recruit had to commit to the 5 gang codes, which were written in Spanish, one for each point of the Texas Star.
Which are fiel, which is faithful, firme, which means that they're down for the group, fuerte, which is strong, orgullo, which is the pride, and la tumba, till the grave. And they're given these when they first come in so that they understand what they're getting themselves into. That this is something, this isn't a joke.
Only after proving themselves could a prospect become a full-fledged member of the gang, known as a carnal, Spanish slang for brother. Only carnals were allowed to view the syndicate's 935-word constitution.
This is a constitution that was confiscated off one of the offenders during a cell search. You don't find too many Texas Syndicate constitutions around. If you find one, you're lucky. The opinion of a cardenal will always be respected. A cardenal shouldn't disrespect another cardenal. A cardenal always has to stay in touch with cardenales here in Texas. Never tell nobody outside of the family the business. It's only for us, for cardenales.
Most carnales came from within the prison system.
They wanted the career criminal mentality.
People they trust tend to be ones that would thrive in the prison environment, which is highly stressful, very competitive, a lot of predatory things going on.
Carnales must be willing to prey on even the most unlikely of marks, including prison staff. Sergeant McQueen is a guard at Ferguson Prison.
These guys invest in, I don't know, how many hundreds of dollars of books to learn how to target people, to watch them, what kind of actions they take, their characteristics in their personality. If you don't know the rules that you're supposed to follow and the rules that the inmates are supposed to follow, you don't enforce that to them, in their mind, you're here for another reason, and they will target you.
Former syndicate member Arnold Darby says he used to flip guards with bribes.
Officers in the Texas prison system don't make an awful lot of money, you know, so you have to, you know, be aware of the ones that might want to make some more money. And some like women and some like drugs, and you talk to them and you feel them out.
You know, they'll sweet talk you into trying to bring stuff into them, and then one little piece of gum or one free world Sudafed will eventually lead to a whole lot bigger picture. Drugs, money, sex, etc., etc. I mean, they're just looking for that one little piece of thread that they can pull that'll unravel money for them. Money is power in prison.
It's also power on the streets. Like any business, the Texas Syndicate rewards its best members with money and protection. But only those who have earned membership are entitled to TS's corporate benefits. It's a lesson 27-year-old Alex Lopez learned the hard way. Austin, Texas, summer 2001. Alex Lopez was running a successful cocaine ring. He told clients that he was a full-fledged member of the Texas Syndicate, a claim that made him virtually untouchable on the streets.
The advantage to claiming TS membership if you're a drug seller is that other people fear you. They won't rob you, they won't short you, they won't give you bad dope. There's a lot of things that won't be done because of the fear of just that Texas Syndicate moniker.
Lopez had once been a candidate for the TS and had friends in the gang. He even used some of them as drug suppliers. But Lopez had failed to pass the TS's stringent entrance requirements for full membership. And now he had violated one of the gang's most sacred rules.
If an individual is claiming to be a gang member, and they haven't been through any kind of initiation process, or they haven't been accepted into that culture, that will be dealt with seriously, and up to and including murder.
Syndicate leaders unanimously greenlit Lopez's murder.
They were stabbed, strangled, whichever way. They will send somebody to do the job, he was going to do it.
Austin, 2001. Months earlier, 27-year-old cocaine dealer Alex Lopez had tried to become a member of the Texas Syndicate, the most feared Tejano gang in the state. But he had failed the gang's stringent, almost corporate requirements.
Each member that joins the Texas Syndicate has to be voted on, and even one that votes no, he's not supposed to get in.
Lopez was posing on the streets as a full-fledged member. The syndicate ordered members to take him out. On July 15th, 23-year-old Texas Syndicate member Neto Zubiate was at a party on the southeast side of town when he spotted Alex Lopez. Neto didn't hesitate.
He pulled out his pistol, shot Alex Lopez once. Alex Lopez turned to get out of the apartment, to run out of the apartment, and Neto Zubiate shot him a second time in the back.
Neto wasn't finished. He wanted to make an example of Lopez.
Alex Lopez fell at the doorway and was laying in the doorway when Neto Zubiate walked up, picked up the back of his head by his hair, and took the pistol and shot Alex Lopez. Basically carried out as an execution.
It was the kind of cold-blooded violence that was disturbing Austin police. 3 years earlier, in 1998, they had teamed up with the federal government to begin mounting a RICO investigation against the Texas Syndicate. A successful RICO case must show that crimes have been committed to further a criminal enterprise. RICO convictions come with lengthy sentences, and the feds hoped the case would cripple the syndicate. Now, the investigation was gaining momentum. Police had recently discovered the body of 24-year-old Jovi Rios, a mother of 3 who was executed for hanging out with TS rivals in the drug trade, the Texas Mexican Mafia.
This was a young mother who was not a gang member. A crime like this, for law enforcement purposes, it's very easy to draw together varying investigative agencies and bodies to work together on a murder like this by a big, organized criminal organization.
The brutality of the Rios murder helped fuel law enforcement's efforts. The RICO investigation lasted 3 more years and would uncover more murders and other violent crimes committed by the gang, revealing the full extent of the Texas Syndicate's criminal enterprise.
We had aggravated robberies that they had conducted. We had a carjacking. We had counterfeiting. We had drug trafficking.
In 2004, after 6 years of hard work, law enforcement brought down the hammer. And on April 1st, 19 Texas Syndicate members were convicted in federal court. Magdaleno Medina, the man who killed Jovi Rios, received 40 years in prison. Neto Zubiate, the gangster who killed Alex Lopez for claiming to be a syndicate member, received a life sentence. In the months following the arrests, gang crime in Austin began to wane.
Anytime you take that number of members from a city off the street, it is going to cause disruption. And the local police department was reporting that there had been a significant decrease in violent crime.
But there are always new syndicate members coming out of prison to replace the ones going in. It wasn't long before the gang was back on its feet and controlling the drug market in Austin.
If you're going to traffic illegal drugs in Austin, you can expect a visit from the Texas Syndicate. If you are having too much success, they will find you out, conduct a home invasion, or in some other way deter your operation.
Though the syndicate continues to reign throughout Texas, there are signs the gang is weakening from within. Over the years, key members have grown tired of the constant bloodshed. This former Longhorn, who asked that his identity be concealed, left the gang after a conversation with a fellow member.
I asked one guy, why are we in war with these other people? He said, I don't know. I told him, you don't know? And you want to turn around and go and kill somebody or try to attempt to kill him? You don't even know why?
Other senior members of the Texas Syndicate, like one of the gang's former chairmen, Antonio Riojas, were bothered by the mentality of the younger generation.
You know, we had discipline, we had control. Just because you were a TS, you were not free to go and bulldog anybody. You had to carry yourself with respect so people could respect you.
During his time as a leader, Riojas saw new members lose their discipline and begin to misuse their power.
Taking drugs that didn't belong to them, or hijacking people for the stuff. Just because you had all these people backing you up didn't mean that you could go around acting like an idiot and cause some problems.
A lot of the rascals coming in, they're hard-headed. They're not big on respect. They brought attention to themselves. They didn't mind disrespecting you, anybody. And these old school inmates didn't cut for that. They didn't cut for that at all.
There are other reasons members have left. In 1985, the Texas Syndicate ruled that it would no longer allow white members. For Arnold Darby, one of the gang's earliest members, it was a slap in the face.
They had said that, you know, that Texas Syndicate was for the Chicano race and no other race. Well, that wasn't what it was when I got in, you know. And so when they said that, I just decided to get out.
But getting out of the Texas Syndicate is even more difficult than getting in.
When you leave, you just don't walk away. There's repercussions. They'll kill you.
Darby decided to make a deal with prison administrators. In exchange for protection, he gave up information on his former brothers.
I passed along information about a number of hits, their constitution, and the membership throughout the units. I burned them in every way I could.
Darby claims that his ability to turn on the gang without being killed is a sign of their deteriorating standards.
There's 4 or 5 Texas Syndicate members in population here, and they haven't hit me. So that tells you the inferior quality.
Darby isn't the only old guard member who's left the Texas Syndicate. In 1995, Antonio Riojas decided that he too wanted out. He'd grown weary of watching the gang's young members disrespect the rules.
I got tired of the nonsense.
Riojas decided to step down as a gang chairman. His decision stunned fellow gang members.
I had been there so long, and they looked up to me. It's like I told them I quit, but you know what, I'll see y'all at the rec yard.
Riojas knew his days were numbered. East Texas, February 1995. In Darrington Prison, 40-year-old Antonio Riojas had done the unthinkable. After 15 years as a member, he had quit the Texas Syndicate, one of the most violent Tejano gangs in the state. He was fed up with its new generation of members who showed no respect for the gang's codes. These 2 former TS members, who asked to have their identities concealed, were on Riojas' unit when he left the gang.
He said, that's the reason I'm getting out. Because you don't live up to what you're supposed to be. So I'm gonna make you do it, and I'm gonna go out. And you're all gonna have to take care of me, or not. And that's what he did.
Riojas, who had held the gang's highest rank for almost a decade, knew what was coming.
There's no getting out, period at all. They'll kill you. That's the bottom line.
Friends urged Riojas to get out of the general population and into protective custody, but he refused.
I don't know, maybe I was pig-headed or stubborn, but I couldn't just tell the warden, hey, get me out of here, I want to quit.
Riojas also wanted to prove a point to the younger gang members. Defiant, he entered the prison's rec yard and waited.
I walked in there in a group, we had a 10-man group, and they were surprised to see me out there. They didn't think I was going to face it.
All of a sudden, they just went fast with it. They started stabbing me. One of them started stabbing him, then the other one comes, started stabbing him. And it just went wild.
Shanks hit Riojas from all sides. He was stabbed repeatedly in the head, arms, and chest, 52 times in all.
And I was thinking, man, just fall down, man. Fall. That's what I was thinking, fall down, man, fall down.
I was like soaking blood from head to toe, and I figured, well, I can't fall here. I have to get out.
Former prison guard Mary Ann Denner says only one thing kept Riojas alive.
His pride. He was a real Texas Syndicate member, and they weren't going to bring him down.
The attack ended when guards fired tear gas into the rec yard. Riojas was still standing, but barely.
I had a chain stuck in the back of my neck, sticking up. I guess a handle came off and it just stayed there. My left arm was paralyzed. I know. The first steps, I stumbled, then I stopped, and I said, no, I can't do this. I can't drop.
Mary Ann Denner was the first guard to reach Riojas.
He says to me, he says, Miss Denner, I got to walk out of this rec yard. They didn't kill me. I got to walk out on this rec yard.
I started walking, little by little, till I got out. I walked to the hallway, all open for me. After that, I kind of started losing consciousness.
He collapsed when we got inside the building, but he had been stabbed 52 times by his ex-fellow gang members.
Riojas was transferred off the unit after the attack. He remains a marked man to this day.
They're gonna try to kill me every chance they get. It's not like I'm worried about it. I don't. I mean, I've lived my life. It wasn't a glamorous life, but I've come to accept that. I didn't get into this blinded.
Despite the loss of veteran members like Riojas, the Texas Syndicate continues to thrive. In many ways, the gang is more dangerous than ever.
They're more prone to violence, and they don't think anything about it. It's just second nature.
They're like a cancer. You keep fighting it. You cut it back when you can.
Law enforcement throughout the state continues to fight the Texas Syndicate. Based on the success of Austin's 2004 prosecution of the gang, other cities are pursuing their own RICO cases. From his cell in Estelle Prison in eastern Texas, Arnold Darby can watch the young gangsters who arrive daily. He also has plenty of time to consider his past, a past he'd do anything to erase.
This was the TS tattoo. It was a Mexican flag, and the top of the T was cut off here, and the S that come around like this right here was cut off. I used them old TDC razors that's real thin, and you bend them, and you just kind of gouge it out a little bit at a time. And it would go deep. It'd go, you know, 1/4 of an inch deep to get all the ink out.
It's a price Darby has paid for running with the most notorious gang in Texas, a price he never foresaw.
I've been locked up 33 and a half years, and obviously if I hadn't did the hit for the Texas Syndicate in '83, I would have probably been out, you know, at least 15 years ago. But, you know, I don't think I ever considered it. My heart was with the Texas Syndicate.